There are many examples that I've used in homilies here before, perhaps not at this Mass, that God's ways are not our ways. We better get used to that because that's the reality. Now, why Jesus chose this knucklehead to be the head of the church makes no sense whatsoever if you stop and think about it from our point of view. I mean, Peter, loudmouth, a lot of good intentions, very little follow through. I'll lay down my life for you. Oh, yeah, sure. Then deny him 3 times because a servant girl challenges him. Even this story here of Peter being made kind of the head of the church a little later on, give Jesus example and give him counsel about, now don't go to Jerusalem because they're after you. And Jesus basically lashes out at him and says, get to the back of the line. You don't think God's way, you're thinking Satan's way. You're trying to be in my way. There Peter is in the back of the group again, scratching his head, wondering how he got there from being in such an exalted position so much earlier. Why Jesus chose Peter? What did he have going for him? No particular wisdom, no particular understanding. But as John's Gospel makes very clear, Jesus asked him, Peter, do you love me? And Peter's answer 3 times was, yes, I love you. Yes, you know I love you. You know all things. You know that I love you. Therefore, Jesus said, feed my lambs, feed my sheep. The reality is God doesn't work with the strongest characters. David, the great king of Israel, he was the youngest of a whole crowd of rather worthy kids. But no, this teenager out there with the sheep is the one God chose to be king of Israel. Or you stop and think of the lives of many of the saints. They were not distinguished people. They were people who loved God and were loved by God. Even take modern apparitions, Lourdes, Fatima. Who got the apparitions? Some theologian? Some bishop? No. Some kids and an illiterate girl. That's who got the apparitions. That's who was given the message, go teach, go show. Our Lady of Guadalupe was not given to the Bishop of Mexico. It was given to Juan Diego, a mestizo. God's ways are not our ways. Now, why is that? Why is that? Well, St. Paul says in one of his letters, consider your own call, brethren. Not many of you were wise as the world counts wisdom. Not many of you strong as the world counts strength. Not many of you were really somebodies the way the world counts somebodies. Oh, the weak things of this world has God chosen to confound the strong. And the foolish things of this world has God chosen to confound those who think they're wise. And the mere nothings of this world has God chosen to confound those who think they're something. And if there's to be any glory at all, it is to be praised and thanks to the Lord Jesus Christ. So one of the reasons that God seems to always work well with the unattached, uneducated, untuned in, is that if anything good comes out, it comes from God, not from the person. That it makes very clear this is God's work in this person, not their natural abilities, not their natural inclinations, not their natural gifts, but God in them. Now that remains true of the leaders of the church. If you haven't noticed, they're all human beings, not angels. They have faults. They have blind spots. They have the same issues that many of us have to deal with in terms of virtues, temptations, struggles, doubts. Our present Pope Francis, when asked about himself, he said, well, the first thing is, I'm a sinner. That's number one. Then we can go from there. So can we all say. So do we all say. But that is no obstacle to God's working in us. That is no obstacle to God's grace being alive in our hearts. That is no obstacle that prevents us from moving forward with the plan of God. It comes down to, do we love God? Do we love Jesus Christ the way he loves us? In reality, that's all any of these people had going for them. That's all any of them had to work with. The rest was God. But their openness, their love for the Lord, their gift of themselves to what God might want in their lives, that was the opening God needed, that humility, if you want. And Peter had that. Remember when he first got a whiff of Jesus, he said, Lord, depart from me. I'm a sinful man. Peter had that humility. Peter had that openness. Peter had that love. And so Jesus said, you're no longer Simon, you're now Rocky. And on this church, on this rock, I'm going to build my church. We're that building. The same kind of people Peter is, with the same kind of weakness Peter has. And yet the work that we do with God's help of God's grace continues to be God at work in us, in spite of our smallness as this world goes. It just takes humility and love. God does all the rest.